back to another episode of Strategic Angling. My name is Brady Hanna. This is
JJ Patton.
And we're here to talk to you about Dobyns Rods, specifically which rods we're using in the fall during crankbait season, which is very popular here on the Mississippi River and elsewhere where the fish like to eat bait fish. So we're going to start with the shorter crankbait rods first and work our way up. So the shortest one that I use and you use?
I have a 635.
Okay, you have a 635, and what are you using that for?
Jerk baits and little poppers. It's a real short rod. You can't cast it very far, but it's got a good flex, and it's for people like me that are a little shorter, it's a good rod for a jerk bait or a tip down because you're not slapping the water. It would probably be good in a kayak, I would imagine.
Is that a 635 CB?
Yes, 635 okay. CB. It's and there is a 634 also, which but the 635 is a good jerkbait rod and a good, pop R, Rico type rod.
Then the shortest one I use, I'm a little bit taller than JJ. I use the 684 Champion CB. I primarily use this one for 110 size jerkbaits and lower, as well as like 1.0 square bills or flat side crankbaits and smaller. It seems to actually cast fairly well for its size. Flat side, it is really nice for a flat side, a light little flat side with the right reel, of course. But that's what I'm primarily using the 684 for. Do you know other series they run these in, or is this just Champion?
Just Champion, yeah.
In the Cadence series, there's a 610 for, which I've heard a lot of guys use for jerk baits, but I have not personally tried that one.
I have not either.
Okay. What's our next one?
Next is a 705 CB, 7 foot. And this is kind of your workhorse. I mean, this is square bills. This is kind of your, if you're going to get one rod, this is the one I would get. It's 7 foot. It's kind of a medium heavy power, I guess, as far as a crankbait rod. Has a lot of flex to it. It's available in a lot of the models, so you can kind of pick your price all the way from $79 up to $270. It's a great rod. If you're just going to buy one crankbait rod, this could kind of do most of it. If you get up to real deep ones, it's going to get overloaded. Real small ones, it's maybe a little too heavy. But just a general like 1.5 or a rattle trap or a something up to 12 foot deep. This is the rod you'd pick if you were just going to get one.
And another popular one that I think Gary even recommends maybe is the 704 CB. Is he using that one for jerkbaits?
He used that for jerkbaits.
So some guys are using the 704 as well. I don't personally. I don't think you.
I have one. I usually have a jerkbait on a 684, and I have like a balsa flat side or a 0.5 or 1.0 crankbait on the 704.
And I know we're talking crankbaits or crankbait rods, but these also can double as great jerkbait rods.
Yep. So
this spring I found a larger jerkbait that I liked, one that I was, I felt like the 684 didn't handle like the Megabass 110+1 or even the +2 very well, because both of those you kind of need to crank them down a little to depth to get your action. And it didn't seem like it was getting them deep enough, so I talked to JJ actually, and he said, well, try the 705, and ended up absolutely loving that. And it works amazing for your heavier, bigger jerk baits as well. So
for sure.
I caught the biggest bass of my life on 705 this spring.
Nice.
Big jerk bait. All right, what's our next one here? Am I talking about this one?
That's
So this is another crankbait rod that we're not really using for the right purpose, I guess, or just design purpose, but this is a 736 CB glass. This is a Champion. And this rod, for me, is one technique, really only, maybe two if I'm feeling a little weird about it. But this is a very good option for a chatterbait with braided line. I personally used it with fluoro. At first, I did not love it. But once I switched to braid and I could feel a little bit more, glass rod is a little bit different feel than graphite. I really have liked the braid chatterbait combo on this rod. And braid doesn't have any stretch, so you want a rod that has a little bit of give. And this rod with braid seems to be a nice little sweet spot.
Yeah, I had one of them, and I prefer a graphite rod for my chatterbaits. I actually use a Sierra 734 or 733 depending on weight, but it's a great chatterbait rod. It's a good rod. The 736 is a good rod for the kind of 8 to 14 foot crankbaits is what And some guys use it for big square bills too. I just prefer the 705 or a shorter one, especially with square bills, because for us, we're target fishing. You're throwing it underneath trees and around on rocks and stuff, and it's not that distance is a huge premium for our square bill needs around here.
And I'll also add, you see other companies make a glass rod kind of designed for chatterbaits, and they're big and huge and bulky, and they don't have much feel. I don't think this falls in that category. To me, this is really not much bigger than another 5-powered rod would be. So I appreciate that. It's almost like a hybrid. I don't know if it feels more like a hybrid. I don't know if there's any science behind that, but I have really liked it for chatterbaits in the grass. So
yeah.
What's the, you were just telling me about one you've been using this year?
Yeah, 764 CB. It's in the Champion model, and it's my go-to rod for I'm gonna say like a Spro Little John MD, Fritz Side 5, DT6, kind of that medium, 4 to 8 to 10 foot range crankbaits. It will handle up to kind of a Series 5, but not a 5XD. But it gives you a little bit more length if you are trying to cast a long way, if you're working along a riprap bank, or trying to stay back from fish or something. And I also like just the way the extra length in fighting the fish. I feel like, especially with smallmouth, it handles their surges real well.
That's the 764?
764.
That's
CB.
not one I've tried yet. Next one we want to talk about is maybe the 80 series.
Yeah, you could talk 765 is the lineup and a lot of guys like that. I don't have one of them. We just don't deep crank.
Yeah.
I have an 805 for when I do. And that handles everything up to, an 8XD is pushing the top end of it. A 6XD is great.
DT14.
Yeah, that 12 to 18 foot range crankbait is real good with that.
And then the last one is the 806. It's really not one that comes into play a ton for us up here in the Midwest, Iowa. I'm sure we could find use for it at a local lake, but that one is kind of designed for what, DD22 and 10XDs. You're gigantic.
Biggins.
And what is curious to me is you watch Bass Elite when they go down to Texas. If you're really paying attention, sometimes you can see a pro from another company maybe throwing a rod with some black electrical tape to hide the logo. A lot of times, Dobyns seems to have the best 8-foot deep cranking option.
Yeah. Something about the crankbait rods that Gary designs and makes, he's just real good at making them. I don't like I said earlier, I don't really like glass rods. I don't particularly like crankbait rods that are real, but something about his, like you said, it's kind of a hybrid where you do have a little bit of backbone, there's still a little bit of section in the butt that you can lean on them if you need to. And a lot of times we have to, because they're around something they're going to get near, and you have to get them out of there,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And if you're not a big cranker and you wanted to use a casting rod that might be more versatile for some other things, a lot of the rods in the Sierra line have kind of that moderate action to the. So like a 703 or 733 Sierra is a good crankbait rod. Even a 2-power Champ XP is a decent crankbait rod. You have to fight them a little different, and but if you're looking for something that maybe can double for some other purposes, that'd be a good one.
Now, one thing to look out for if you decide you want to try one of these out, or you're gonna look at these on the website. They have their own section on the website, or they're in the crankbait section. You need to make sure, we're throwing numbers around, and I can't remember if we said CB every single time, but all the rods we've primarily been talking about are part of the CB crankbait series. So if it doesn't have that numbering and it just says C, you're probably dealing with a normal casting rod.
Yeah, like the 764 CB that I was talking about. You would not want to use a 764C for those crankbaits, because you would get your heart broke more than once.
And on the water, it might be good to give yourself a little color indicator. I made a fatal mistake in a tournament last year. I thought was my 736 glass, but it was a 736C. Not a great spook rod. Pulled a spook right out of a 4-pound smallmouth's mouth, and was just like, what happened? And I looked down, and I got my frog rod instead of the big glass rod. So
yeah,
definitely check your numbering. Maybe if you have some overlap with same numbers, color code them if you do decide to put some in the boat. But anything else you want to add about this CB series?
No, I think you covered one thing. One thing I would tell you is if you want to use a CB rod for other techniques like spinnerbaits or chatterbaits or single hook, even swim baits and stuff, try to get a low stretch line like braid or braid to fluoro or a fluoro with low stretch. You can offset some of the action of the rod by using a line with no stretch. Just like I use a graphite rod for my chatterbaits, but I use fluorocarbon or mono, so it kind of equals out the difference of the rod versus the line, and you can kind of play with it and get into the middle somewhere if you want.
I keep saying one last thing, but actually one last thing. So, if you look at the other series and you kind of get more rod what you pay for, there is a big difference between a Fury, 734 versus a DX, right? In sensitivity,
Right.
That maybe not the numbers aren't right, but in the crankbait line, this is one where you can go a little more affordable. The 705 Fury is an incredibly popular, great value for $119. I would encourage you to try that one. The 705 Champion is great. You get a little more sensitivity, but if you're fishing a crankbait, most times these guys hook themselves.
You don't want it. You don't want it all the time.
Yeah. Maybe sometimes being a little slow to it helps you, but
Yep.
This is a series or the style of fishing where you can get away with a little bit of the more affordable.
Yep, I would agree.
So.
Yep.
All right, before we go, him and I could talk about CB rods all day. We both use them quite a bit. Love it up here in Iowa. But this is the end of the episode. This episode is brought to you by K&K Hardware in Bendorf, Iowa, and my name is Brady Hanna.
And I'm JJ Patton. Thanks for tuning in.
We'll see you next week.
See you guys.